Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about social media and how to use it in your activism or in your advocacy work. It's intended for people who have come from a lot of different backgrounds of social media, and maybe some of you have never used it before, or you choose not to be on the apps, or you haven't used it professionally, and others might have already been using it for years, and you might be like, you know, this is so basic. Today, what I would like to do with this workshop is get three main things out of it. Firstly, I want to talk a bit about why social media is important and why it's such a useful tool in lobbying. I would like to equip you with some of the tools for social media and how you can use it in your own campaigns and in your own work. The advice here doesn't have to be specific to fair trade, although this is a fair trade program, so maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it can also apply to any campaigning that you're doing. It can also apply to your personal accounts if you want to do some activism through all of that, all of those channels, because the rules remain pretty much the same. Okay. The guidelines remain pretty much the same. And lastly, I hope that you have some more confidence after this talk. If you don't, then that's probably a piece of feedback for the next talk, so that you can leave and think, okay, I know the basics of how I could begin to use social media to make a difference to EU policies or to whatever social issue you're passionate about. So I'm Cass. I'm a full-time communications consultant. I work primarily with NGOs that are working on climate justice projects. So right now I'm doing a bit of work for the Fair Trade Advocacy Office, for the World Federation for Animals, for European Coalition for Corporate Justice. And I also run a climate justice newsletter. This is called The Green Fix, and it aims to create accessible introductions to different concepts in sustainability and round up free resources for climate action that go beyond recycling. It's more like campaigns you can get involved in and social media tools. And I'm literally just thinking of social media because that's what I'm talking about right now, but there is other things in there. And in the past, I worked for the Fair Trade Advocacy Office as a media assistant. Back in the day, wasn't that long ago, and Oxfam EU and Friends of the Earth Europe. And then I went freelance, and here I am today. So in all of these organizations, I worked in communications and helped with the social media or managed the social media. So this has given me a little bit of an insight into what works and what doesn't work, particularly in the EU bubble, but also in general through all activism. But rather than just tell you that I know what I'm talking about, I'm going to actually talk about the thing. So I'll move on. So firstly, what is social media activism? You may have had discussions about this in the past where social media activism is seen sometimes as kind of secondary to real activism, because real activism is when you're on the streets with a microphone, so the stereotype goes. Whereas social media is like, maybe you tweet about it afterwards. There's even a word that's slacktivism, which is so the people that think, oh, I retweeted this, so I've done my bit for social justice or for environmental justice. So there's a few negative connotations around social media for activism. And I would like to flip that a little bit. Social media is quite a key part of social change these days. It's no longer just a network to share pictures of cats and where your aunt uploads like 50 pictures of her holiday because everyone clearly wants to see all 50 pictures. It's become an instrumental part of politics, of lobbying, and pretty much anyone that wants to get the attention of the general public is on social media now. So A good example of movements that have been started or supported through social media is the one that everyone thinks of first, which is the Black Lives Matter movement last summer. Social media was a huge tool for that, not just with the people posting the black squares, which was a whole controversy on its own, but people were sharing resources about how to stay safe at protests and which areas were safe to protest in and which weren't, and to drive attention to topics that might not be covered in the mainstream media. Other examples include the Me Too movement, and there's also a lot of campaigns that run primarily online, like the Fridays for Future strikes. If they didn't have social media, I mean, there'd be fewer people striking on Friday, long story short. It's a really good platform to draw attention to things that aren't in the newspapers and that aren't in Politico's front page or whatever is the main media outlet of your home country. Because it's not always the case that the media is talking about the issues that you're lobbying on or that you're working on. And social media is a way to say, hey, we should be paying attention to this. And if no one else is going to talk about it, then I'm going to start talking about it. Particularly in the EU, social media has become not just an asset to activism and to policy making, but an integral part of it. I'd say if you're not in social media and you're doing advocacy in the EU, you're probably not getting as much engagement as you would be if you were online. I have more about that on the next slide. Oh, also the background is a post from Fridays for Future, which is supposed to advertise the climate strike, but I put the text box right over it so you can't tell what it is, but that's what it is. Anyway, so specific to the EU, social media is a pretty important tool. I mean, that's what I said 2 minutes ago, but I'm going to repeat it. The EU institutions, so the European Parliament, the European Commission, and every politician in the EU institutions is online. And you can see this because if you're ever like live streaming those conferences that they have, when they have in-person conferences, half the people in the audience are not actually looking at what is happening. They're on their phones. This is, okay, we could talk separately about whether that's good or not, because that's probably a problem. But the point is that most policymakers, journalists, and people attending these conferences, their reflex now is, I should post about this online. I should be putting this on Twitter. I should say that I'm at this event and post what is happening. So it's on everybody's minds. And there was a study in 2019 by Politico. A lot of you probably know Politico, but if you don't, it's one of the biggest media outlets for covering issues in EU policies. And they do an analysis. I think they do it every year. Well, I've said on the slide that they do it every year, but don't quote me on that. They regularly do analyses of who is active on social media in the EU bubble. And they found that there were 629 members of the European Parliament who were active on Twitter in 2019. That was before Brexit, so that was out of 750 MEPs, quite a lot of people. And all the commissioners of the European Commission are on Twitter, and they're all following each other. It's like, it really is a bubble. I don't know how familiar you are with the EU bubble, but everybody knows everybody, and it's kind of weird. Anyway, and as well as the EU institutions, there are other people in the EU bubble that are pretty influential. Some of them influential exclusively through social media, others because of their job. So I think one of the most influential Twitter accounts in the same analysis was Florian Bayer, who was the editor of a daily bulletin of news for what was happening across the EU. And his Twitter account was also one of the most influential. There are other people who work in NGOs, who are experts, other journalists who are also pretty big players in the Twitter world. And I named Politico already, but there's also an organization called ZN, probably stands for something, I don't know what, and they analyze who is most influential each year. So Politico analyzes the EU institutions, and ZN analyzes the whole Euro Twitter sphere. They have some methodology for deciding who's in the EU bubble and who isn't, but I didn't read what it was. But it's pretty clear that it is its own ecosystem of information, right, within the Brussels bubble. Not that the EU is just in Brussels, but you would think it was. So that's a little bit about why social media is important. And then I want to talk a bit about what social media platforms to use. But actually, before then, I feel like there's a couple more points about why it's important to be on social media, which is that you can react faster to things now. So there's two reasons that are specific to the last year, particularly now that everything is online, more or less. Everybody is spending more time on their screens. Everybody, even like if you're trying not to, you probably still are spending a lot of time on social media, on your laptop, because we have to for work, for conferences, but so are the policymakers and the people that you're hoping to influence with your campaigns. So they're in the same channels as you. All of a sudden, it's not so hard to reach them because they're all on Twitter rather than doing their jobs. No, they're also doing their jobs, but they're mainly on Twitter. And the second reason is that there is a lot of quite fast moving news, particularly over the last year. It's been pretty chaotic on a global scale, and it's important to have a way to react quickly to current affairs. And people have very short attention spans these days. It's important to react to news through a blog that appears a week later. People want to see your reaction now. Again, this is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. This is just the state of the information environment that we're in. By information environment, I mean the way that news and the way that communication is working today in the EU bubble, but also across the world. That we expect things fast, we expect things to be short and snappy, and we will be expecting everybody to react instantly to things. Again, we could have a whole separate talk about how this is leading to the rise of misinformation, but presumably none of you here are going to be using social media to spread misinformation, but only to react with, good, thoughtful reactions to current affairs. So, what social media platforms should you use? Again, I'm speaking quite generally now because it depends. It depends what you're trying to achieve. Let's imagine that you have a campaign of some kind. You care about one specific cause. It could be a campaign for a better gender equality in employment laws. It could be for climate accountability, holding national governments accountable to their climate promises. It could be to promote rewilding. Really, it's up to you. But the platform that you use is going to depend on what that campaign is and what it needs. So I put here a little bit of an overview of the different social media networks. This isn't all of them. I'm sure you can name a lot more. But here I put how well the different platforms work for different kinds of activism. So firstly, you've got Twitter. I'm going to talk a lot about Twitter in this talk because it's where the whole of the EU is, apparently. And it's also, I would say, in my experience, the best one for targeting policymakers. They're most likely to be active on Twitter. They're most likely to see what you actually post, and they're probably checking it a lot more than their other social media networks. Then you have Facebook. I wouldn't really prioritize Facebook for lobbying. It is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, social media network today still. despite it being the glitchiest, most annoying website I've ever had to work with. Every day it fills me with pain when I open Facebook, but it is still one of the biggest social media networks out there. It is a really good tool for reaching the general public. Again, this is in my experience working EU advocacy. I find that the people that I reach through NGO Facebook pages are more not young people as in under 30-year-olds per se, but more middle-aged 40 plus age brackets are on Facebook, and not just on Facebook but following NGOs. I don't know if anyone can relate, but I'm on Facebook, but I don't really go through the newsfeed these days anymore. It's just a chat function for me. And the days of scrolling through people's holiday photos, that's long gone. I'm not following organizations on there. And I feel like that might be the same for other people in the younger age range, so 18 to 30-year-olds. Then you have Instagram, which is where all the cool kids are at. Well, I say that because I'm on Instagram. It's where a lot of the younger generation are. And in recent years, it's become quite a useful tool for activism, particularly youth activism. If you're on Instagram, then you've probably seen it already, that people use the visual of Instagram, because you have a photo attached to the text. They're using that to share a lot of information. It's like mini PowerPoint slides. It's like this PowerPoint, but even shorter. And this is a really good tool if you're mainly looking to connect with other grassroots NGOs, with other young people, or just to garner support rather than change laws. Again, policymakers, I don't think von der Leyen's on Instagram. I haven't checked, but she hasn't slid into my DMs lately, so I'd say probably not. WhatsApp is one that isn't really used very much by NGOs, but it is used a lot by policymakers. If you're reading articles from Euractiv, half of them go, oh, after a leak from a private WhatsApp group that these politicians were secretly making their policy decisions in, we discovered X, Y, Z. So it's kind of the hidden social media app, because it's not really a good way to share information. But you can make it work for you. I've seen a couple of organizations use it where you can sign up to receive WhatsApp alerts of breaking news. There was this really amazing campaign, I think in a suburb in Mexico City, where there was an information campaign by a local NGO, but they didn't know how to reach the people that they wanted to reach, who were from lower income backgrounds. And essentially they started sharing their information through WhatsApp alerts, because everybody had WhatsApp, but they weren't reading the news and they weren't going on other social media accounts, but they were checking their phone during the day. So it really depends where your audience are. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is also a useful tool. I would say it's, again, not the primary one for lobbying, but it's really good space to have more in-depth conversations, to post longer things, to post analysis. The engagement there tends to be a little slower and a little deeper, by which I mean people are more likely to spend time commenting on your posts, and you can go a bit more in depth and keep people's attention. Also, it makes you look very professional. Then lastly, I put TikTok. TikTok is kind of seen as like, 16-year-olds that are dancing and saying strange things, but that's not the only reason you have to use TikTok. Actually, even the UN is on TikTok now. They made a TikTok video promoting the SDGs, and it's growing so fast that other social media platforms are copying it. I don't know if you saw Instagram Reels, very similar concept. Video is really growing in popularity across audiences. Again, von der Leyen is probably not on TikTok. Not yet, but one day her comms team will make her go on TikTok, and then it will be relevant. You don't have to be on every social media platform. It's good to choose which one is most useful for your goals. Why should social media be part of your campaigning? I already talked a little bit about this earlier, but I'll just add on a couple of points. Social media is a really direct link to your target audience and to policymakers. And I'm splitting these because you can have two audiences with your campaign. You can have your audience of supporters, the people that will help you reach the people who can change what you want changed. And then you have the people with the final power. So if you want a change in employment laws for gender equality, there's the policymakers that are responsible for proposing and implementing those laws, but there's also this whole bunch of people that support your cause that may be influential in their own circles that can help promote your message, and it's also important to reach them. So you have two audiences that you're reaching. You can also have more audiences than that, but I'm sticking with those two for now. Secondly, what I said before about needing to react quickly. People will see your social media before your emails. You know, NGOs spend a lot of time crafting press releases and media reactions and blogs and op-eds and email newsletters, and those are all important parts of communication, but they serve a different purpose. You know, if some breaking news happens, you don't start creating a newsletter to tell people how you're reacting to it, because they're not going to see it. It's going to take ages to put together. And the same with putting things on your website. If something breaking happens in the world, people are not rushing to your website to see what you have to say about it. Sorry, they're not. They're going on Twitter to see what everyone else is saying about it and decide what the right reaction is. So this allows you to react a lot faster, and you know, you don't have to craft an entire blog around it. So you can react initially and then follow up with a more in-depth piece later through another communications channel. You can also build a community of supporters. This is kind of linked to the first point, so I won't repeat myself too much. But you can have a whole world out there of other NGOs, other activists that want to support each other. And if you can all be supporting each other on social media, then you're mutually amplifying the different causes. You're not one NGO, the only NGO working on this one cause or anything like that. You are part of a movement, whatever cause you care about. There are thousands of people working on it, so connect with them. It's easy to create a dialogue with others. You can actually, you know, tag a policymaker, you can hold them accountable, you can reply to other people, you can create a conversation. Other communications channels like emails, blogs, articles, they're quite one way. It's quite difficult for your audience to respond. And it's more like an announcement, right? But social media, it's more like a conversation. You can say things and then people can add their own responses to you, and hopefully they're not trolls. But the point is, it's two-way, and that's good. So, how do I get started? I have created a checklist here based on, again, my experience. There is a tendency among NGOs, among businesses as well, to think, oh my God, everyone's on social media. I have to get on social media. You start a Twitter account. Let's get on Facebook. Let's get on LinkedIn. Let's get on YouTube. YouTube, I didn't include that in the slide earlier. Anyway, the idea is people know that social media is a good place to be. So they just start the account without really knowing what they're doing. They're like, oh my God, we have to be present. We have to be relevant. So it's not the way to do it. This will not end well for you. So if you want to have more success in the long run, it's good to do some planning beforehand and ask yourself a few questions about why you are using the social media and how it can best serve you. So the checklist. Firstly, where are your target audience? This should be where your target audience is, because like I said in the last slide, you can have more than one audience. So it's the people you want to lobby and your supporters. and the people that can help amplify your cause. So you really need to pick the channel here, because like I said before, if you're looking to reach EU policymakers, don't start with TikTok. I mean, you could, but it would be weird. You should probably start with Twitter, where you know that they are already active. If you're not sure where they're active, you can look up the people that are responsible for the laws, because I'm talking about the EU, but if you're lobbying like national policymakers, or perhaps not even policymakers at all, but local governments, like look up where they're active, go on their website and see what social media handles they have linked and whether they're actually posting on them. And if you have already an audience of supporters, you can do a little bit of a poll. You can say, what social media networks are you on? You can put it in a newsletter. You can ask for feedback and do a survey. Basically, figure out where they are and where most of them are. You don't have to be on every channel that your supporters are on. Secondly, think about whether your campaign is suited to one particular channel more than another. I put Instagram here because Instagram is very good for visual media, because the main part of the post is the picture, and people are more likely to see the picture than your text. So if you are doing some art campaign for change, Instagram would be a good channel to start with, whereas WhatsApp or LinkedIn would not be so successful because it wouldn't translate as well. It would cut the photo. It would just, yeah. It can work, but it's more hassle. So think about what really suits you. Then think about what your goal is. So this is perhaps one of the most important questions. Are you on social media because everyone else is on social media, so you feel like you should be? Or do you have a specific goal? Hopefully it's the second. And when you're defining your goal, you don't have to have just one specific goal, but it's good to have something to work with. This could be getting donations for a particular fundraiser. This could be just to raise awareness of an issue. It could be to start a particular campaign, it could be to support someone else's campaign. It's good to have your goal in mind. Do you just want people to know about you, or do you want them to do something? Do you want them to join you in some way? This should shape a bit the content that you put out and which channels you're using as well. And then I put, do you need it? Because yeah, the number of organizations that should not be on social media, but yet they are. There's so many. You know when like random businesses are on social media, like you look up your local train network and they're like, follow us on Instagram. Like, why would I do that? Why do I care what my train company is posting on Instagram? Anyway, slight rant over. The point is, only be on social media if you really need to be. Think also about your capacity. So before you launch into starting platforms, think about what you have the time and the capacity to maintain, because it's a long-term thing, right? You might be super enthusiastic now to start a social media channel, be like, yeah, let's get on Twitter, let's do it. But if you're going to be too busy to maintain it for the next 2 months, or you don't have time to post more than once every 2 months, then it's probably actually going to hold you back, because people will see that you're not active, and it doesn't look good to have an inactive social media channel. So be realistic with what you can do and who is going to do it and how much time you're going to give to it. Then lastly, think about, what is your voice? So before you start posting, you should have a very clear idea of what it is that you're trying to say, and your voice as an organization, or as I say organization, it can be just a group of people that are wanting to make a change. It can be one person. It can be just you. Think about whether you want to be more kind of formal and institutional, EU bubble, full on talking about the externalities and the internal processes of whatever, You can go that super formal policy route. You could be more rebellious. You could be a bit like Extinction Rebellion and reject the status quo and be quite full on with your activism. You could be more friendly and gentle. Depends again who you're trying to reach, who you're talking to, and what image you want to get across. And if you're already working for an organization, you'll already have a pretty good idea of what your voice is. You just need to make sure that you know how to translate this onto social media. I said I would focus on Twitter, and here I am focusing on Twitter because, as I said, it is the most popular social media channel within the EU bubble, and in general, the best one for reaching decision makers. I put here a little bit of a starter pack. So say you've asked yourself these questions, you've been, up at night being like, oh my God, what is the best channel for my social media campaigning? And then you're like, okay, I know what I want to do. I'm ready. I know what I'm going to say. Now what? Now comes the actual moment of, and here's my starter pack. So firstly, you should have some brand guidelines. This sounds more formal than it has to be. Basically, you should have a logo and a set of agreed sort of colors and wording that you're going to use to make everything that you post recognizable as you. I put the Fair Trade Twitter bio here just as an example. It's a bit of a random example, but it's not random. It's a Fair Trade webinar. Most organizations will have something like this that you can look at for a comparison. So you can see you've got the Fair Trade logo in the profile photo. You've got this cover photo in the Fair Trade brand guidelines. By that, I mean the font and the colors match Fair Trade, plus what the images are of these producers matches all the other images that Fair Trade puts out, right? So it's pretty easy to identify as a Fair Trade photo. They've also put a hashtag in the bio of Fair Trade. They've also weirdly hashtagged farmers and workers. I'm not so sure about that. But anyway, you can put your hashtag right there so people know what you will be posting about. You've got your one line to make it very clear who you are and what you are doing. I like the line they put here where they say, Fair Trade International and its member organizations work to secure better trade terms for farmers and workers. Like, boom, you know who they are, what they're doing, and why you should follow them if you want to find out more about the work that they're doing. And you can see that it's working because they've got 46,000 followers. So you should have some way to make sure that everything you post is recognizable as you. Second part of your starter pack, have a content calendar. This goes back to my previous point. Don't just start a social media platform with no idea what you're doing just because, oh my God, it's really exciting to start a social media platform. I've been there, I've done it, it doesn't end well. You should have a calendar beforehand. This means that you know what you're posting and when, and that you can make sure that you have things going out consistently. Because what happens when you don't have a calendar of some kind or some kind of plan is you start the account, you post a bunch of stuff, you get distracted, other urgent work comes up, you don't post for like 3 or 4 days, then you're like, oh my God, I haven't been on Twitter, and then you retweet a whole bunch of stuff, and then it happens in a cycle. It's not really the best way to work, it's quite stressful, and it doesn't look very consistent. If you have a calendar, you can make sure that you're posting consistently and also that you're not missing out on important external events. So if you're a justice activist, it's pretty useful to remember to post on the climate strike day and not just let that pass you by. You can be more on it, you can be more relevant to what is happening in the external world. Thirdly, familiarity with the platform. So this just means before you start posting stuff, take some time to get familiar with how the platform works. I remember I had to create a guide to using TikTok at my previous job. I've never used TikTok, so I had to download TikTok, figure out how to use it and then explain to other people how to use it. And oh my God, like, it's so confusing. Or am I just old? I don't know. Anyway, it was really useful to have that time just to create some drafts, to figure out how different things work, to make the mistakes before other people see that you're making a mistake. So just get a little bit familiar with it. And then fourthly, I put this in caps locks because I have strong opinions. Realistic expectations. So, okay, I feel like I'm repeating myself quite a bit, but again, you don't have to be on every single social media platform to have a successful social media campaign. You only need one to start with, or whichever you are able to manage. Also, you will not start a social media platform and then go viral overnight. It does not happen. You need to match your expectations to what you're posting about. A lot of everybody wants to go viral on social media. Like, even if we say that we don't care and like, oh, followers don't matter, come on, we'd all really like it if everybody was retweeting our stuff. It would be cool. But this is not really realistic, and usually it's not that important. If you're posting on a niche topic or in one region, you don't need 2 million followers to support your cause. You only need the followers that are actually going to support you and that are going to be useful to your campaign. This could be 5,000 people, it could be 500, it could be 5. If you're campaigning for something on your street, I don't know why you'd start a Twitter account for something on your streets, but let's say that you did. In that case, there'd be maybe 5 relevant people. And in that case, having 5 followers would be amazing. So you have to match it to what you're trying to achieve. And if you're posting on something very technical, like the UN working group for whatever, you're not going to get loads and loads of retweets, but you don't need them because it's not an issue that is applicable to or that is relevant to a wide audience. You only need the important people to your cause. So keep it realistic. Don't expect to be a viral sensation when you're posting about EU because it won't happen. I mean, it could happen. Send me your tweet if it does happen. And then I put optional social media scheduling tools. As I was saying with the calendar, it can be really hard to stay consistent with your posting because, as you know, social media is very fast moving and there's people that are on there every day. Some of them are on there all day. That's not great. And you shouldn't have to sacrifice your life to sit in front of your Twitter feed and make sure that you are consistently posting and retweeting and sharing. With the social media scheduling tool, you can schedule your posts and reshares of other people's posts ahead of time. I do this a lot for work, so I will just sit down like on a Monday morning and I'm like, oh, I love to kick off the week with some UN policy process rescheduling of posts. I don't know if that's sarcastic. So for then, it's really useful to have social media scheduling to make sure that you have stuff lined up for when you are going to be too busy to be checking social media. Also, because otherwise you will stop everything to check every notification all the time if they are all open on your laptop. I know this because this is what I do. So that is my starter pack. There's probably other things that would be useful, but you don't have to overstretch yourself. So getting started, I'm going to just go through this quite quickly because I'm talking specifically about Twitter, but that might not be applicable to everyone. It's mainly an example of how to get familiar with the platform. So for example, on Twitter, you have very little space and you have 280 characters. Twitter is one of the platforms with the least amount of space to post, but it's good to be concise across any platform. Just because you can say more doesn't mean you should say more. I'd like to send this as like a message into the brains of every person in the EU bubble. You don't have to say more just because you can. Also make sure that you know your image specifications so that when you are posting a really good graphic, it doesn't get cut off at the key parts. You know, if you're posting an event, you don't want the graphic to get cut off where it says the day. So check that the images you're posting fit. your post. Also, social media posting is not just about original posts. Engage with other people, comment, retweet, reply to other people's things, like their stuff. Make sure that you're engaging with others. And you can tweet or post more than just words. You can post text, but you can also post videos, images, GIFs, polls, memes. Love it if more people posted memes. Oh, make my Twitter feed so much more interesting. So I put just a Twitter feed there. By the way, the reason the Twitter feed is in black, I don't know if you've seen this, but they brought out a night mode, which is really good. It's good for your eyes because it's darker, and it's also slightly better for saving energy. So turn your night mode on if you can. So what makes a good social media post? I have been talking for so long. I've put an example here. This is a post that I did for Friends of the Earth last year. And I'm just using my own work as an example. So first of all, plan in advance. What is the right moment to post? By this, I mean the obvious. Don't be posting important things at midnight. Nobody is on Twitter. Well, okay. Nobody should be on Twitter at midnight. And think about the time zones of your followers. If you are reaching people from across the world, make sure that you have stuff going out also when it's their morning and their daytime, not just yours. At the moment, I work for an organization where most of the followers are in America, so I am scheduling stuff in American time, and that gets better engagement than posting it in my time. Add visuals. Visuals change the world. Okay, they don't, but they get better engagement. People like to look at things, not to read words, basically. So if you can add images, videos, emojis to your tweet, it breaks up the text. It makes people slightly more likely to spend more time reading it. It's just more visually appealing and eye-catching. Also, add hashtags. This is not really specific to Twitter. This is most social media platforms. Add some hashtags so that when people are searching for the topic you're posting about, they can actually see that you're posting about it. It's a really easy way for them to find you. You can also tag people. This is quite important for activism. Make sure that you're tagging your policymakers, your EU institutions. You don't have to just hope they see it. You can literally say, hey, European Commission, I think that you should do this. Will they respond? Probably not. But it's a really good way to keep people accountable, especially if you're targeting policymakers with slightly smaller audiences. Don't go straight to the European Commission every time, because you're not the only one. You can also tag people in images. You can tag up to 10 people on Twitter, and infinite number of people on Instagram. So abuse that privilege. Put in a call to action. Don't just announce things, like tell people what you want them to do. This is really important for campaigning. Don't just say, we need change, because like what am I meant to do with that information? Say like, read this article or sign our petition, or as I put here, retweet if you support Milieu Défensi with their campaign. It just gives people the extra impetus to actually do something. And then I put be concise in the way that I am not being in this talk, and keep it to one message. So make sure that you're not trying to pack in 5 things into a tweet. A tweet is not a media briefing and it's not a report. You're not going to be able to fit in all the nuance and all the details that you might want to in one tweet. So you have to focus on like, what is the most important thing to say, and then just say that. And like, if you have to add more, you can create a thread, or use a different platform. If you can't fit what you have to say on Twitter, then maybe Twitter. It's not the right platform for you. And be readable. So, the number of people that are like running Twitter accounts that don't have any comms experience, and you can identify them immediately because every word is a hashtag. And I tried to look for an example, but then I thought it's kind of mean to name and shame people. But you know what I mean. It's like when you look up some local shop and their tweets are so hard to read, and it kind of makes me cry inside. So don't do that. Be readable. you are on Twitter or whatever social media and nobody is reacting to your posts and you're like, oh my God, I am the loneliest Twitter user in the world. Why is nobody reacting? Here's some possible reasons. Firstly, perhaps you're not reacting to theirs either. It's quite a common trap to get excited about posting and talking about your work and your cause because you care about it. But if you are not actively getting involved in what other people are posting, they have no reason to go and get involved in your things. People are not going to reply or retweet if you're not supporting them. So make sure that it's two-way. It is a conversation, not an announcement board, not a bulletin. Make sure, like I was saying before, to be gentle with your usage of hashtags and emojis. It's good to include them, but like sprinkle them in. Don't like put in every emoji and every hashtag you can think of, because it will not get a lot of engagement. It's good to, as a kind of general rule, to try and aim for 2 hashtags and 2 emojis per post, maximum. Sometimes you can go over, sometimes you can go under. It's not a fixed rule, but it should give you an idea of how much you can fit in. Perhaps your message is unclear. Perhaps you tried to pack too much into one post, or it was not relevant to your audience, or it was using a lot of jargon. Perhaps people just did not understand what you were saying. So maybe then it's time to revisit the language. Maybe you're posting too much or not enough. I know the annoying thing about this list is like you might be doing this too much, or you might not be doing it, or it's a balance with everything. Don't post 15 tweets in a row, please, and don't only post every 2 months. Try and be consistent. The exact number of posts doesn't really matter. People think that it matters a lot, but it's going to be mixed into a whole news feed of posts. People are not counting how many posts you specifically did. So as long as it's consistent and spaced out, it doesn't really matter if it's 2 tweets a day or 10 tweets a day or whatever. It's whatever works for you, but just don't spam people. And lastly, I don't know, maybe the algorithm just changed. You know, sometimes I was posting on accounts that had 1 million followers and still some posts would just not get engagement, and you can be doing everything right and it just doesn't happen because the algorithms, they change all the time. Sometimes people just will not even see your post in their feed, and it's very hard to control that. You can do all the right things for a social media post and still not get engagement, and that just happens. You cannot lose sleep thinking that your post was bad all the time. Look at the overall pattern rather than each individual post. If none of your posts are getting engagement, you are the problem. And if only one of them did, then probably it was just an unlucky algorithm thing. So lastly, because I realized that I'm getting close to the hour, accessibility. If you're working on EU causes, your audience has a lot of different first languages, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different accessibility needs. So do make sure that your posts are actually catering to them. You should be reflecting the values that you endorse, which hopefully include diversity and inclusivity. So here's some tips on how to make sure that your posts are accessible. Firstly, in hashtags, capitalize each word. The tweet I put here is an example of that. On sound software, Black Lives Matter is if you put it all as one word in lowercase, it's pronounced Black Live Smatter. So if you are hard of hearing and you're using sound software, you're not going to get the picture. But if you capitalize the words, it will read it out correctly. It's also easier for people who have issues visually to read it. Add a text description to pictures so that it will be read out by people with accessibility needs that are using this software. Set your captions for videos. Again, make sure that your posts are as readable as possible. So limit how many hashtags and tags you're using. It should be clear what you're saying. And again, try and avoid technical language and a lot of jargon because it will exclude people that don't understand super technical terms. Also, in general, if you can't get your message across in a simple way, then probably you don't understand the message that well. That sounds a little harsh, but if you should be able to explain anything simply, basically. Make sure that your graphics have a high color contrast. This again helps with ease of accessibility for people with visual issues. It also just makes it easier to read. And then I put a link to a really useful blog on how to make sure that your posts are inclusive and accessible, because this is just the tip of the iceberg, but I didn't have time to go through them all. Lastly, make sure that you have some way to monitor the media, how well your social media is doing. I won't go through all of this because I am talking quite a lot now, but most social media platforms, particularly Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, have free tools to analyze how well your social media is doing. And I put here the list of how you can find it. And there's certain things that you should look for. So look for whether your engagement rate is growing. By engagement, I mean the number of people that are interacting with your posts by liking it, sharing it, responding to it, number of people clicking on your profile. It gathers all this data, and you should be looking at it growing or at least staying consistent. But if it's going down, then it's time to revisit how you're doing your social media. Look at what people are interacting with, which posts are they liking, and when did you post them, and what was in those posts. It gives you an idea of what works better than others. It gives you an idea of what times are better to post and what days are better to post. And if there's a massive spike or a massive dip, it tells you if something's done really well or if it's done badly. But also, sometimes the dips are not because of you. They could be external things. If something massive has happened in the world and you are trying to launch a report on social media the same day, you probably will see a dip because people are not seeing it because they are distracted by the bigger breaking news. So it just lets you see the overall trends. Okay, I'm nearly done. I put here a list of free tools. These are all tools that I have used and can vouch for in social media, and they're all accessible to people who haven't used social media for campaigning before. So I already mentioned social media scheduling. You have Hootsuite, you have Buffer, you have TweetDeck for Twitter. TweetDeck also allows multiple users to use the same Twitter account, so it's quite useful for that. And you have If This Then That, say that 5 times fast, which lets you coordinate things across different platforms, even things like tweet when an email goes out and things like that. It's really cool. You can waste a lot of time on that website. Link shorteners, you've probably seen these already. If you have a giant URL, that's going to take up a lot of characters in your post, but you can shorten them on Buffer or on Bitly. If you want to put a link with multiple links in your bio, so not just a website, but to multiple places, you can use Linktree, and you can use, I don't know how to say this, melt, yeah. It plants trees. So that's cool. And for graphic design, you can use Canva. I love Canva. Canva has saved my life. I give my soul to Canva. This was a increasingly fast overview of social media, whilst the time looked at me ominously in the background. But I hope that even though it was a bit rushed, and even though I'm not able to cover everything, that it was quite a useful overview of how social media can help you with your campaigning and how you might apply it to your own campaigns or activism. Again, I've been saying NGO or organization, but I do a lot of this through my personal accounts because I post about climate justice, and the guidelines remain the same, particularly about being concise, being engaged with other people, just having a conversation about the issues you care about. So hopefully this will give you some food for thought for how it can help in your own campaigns.